Hello everybody, Vulcan here, and this video is partly in response to Adel's second part to his two-part video on how he expects RWBY Volume 4 to move forward. You can find the link in the description below, so be sure to check that out and also subscribe to his channel because he comes up with some really good theories, so yeah, do check out some of his other videos as well. Now, to summarize his point on that particular video, the development of various characters throughout the show, especially in how much of it can seem rushed, is his primary concern. Given that within the span of 2 episodes, Yang is seen wearing her new arm. This inspired me to think about what I like the most about the way RWBY handles character development and what makes the show so unique with respect to other series, be it anime or otherwise. Therefore, this video will focus primarily on those aspects of the show and why I believe character development hasn't necessarily been rushed. So to start off, I want to begin from the very earliest days of the show with a character that stood out to me as having experienced a significant amount of growth in this series. Let me talk a bit about Jean Arc. Throughout the course of the show, Jean has had at least two very strong character arcs in which he experienced a considerable amount of growth. In all of his arcs, he went through experiences that are common with people of his age in real life even. Like Adel says in his video, RWBY is very much a character-driven story. The show doesn't simply present us with a particular event and have characters deal with that situation as it comes. It shows us how characters are affected by those events from an emotional perspective and consequently how they grow from those experiences. This is what sets RWBY apart from other very popular series in my opinion, series such as, Dragon Ball, Naruto, and Bleach. While each of those series do have some level of character development, it's not treated as a priority, and sometimes it's even very inconsistent. I'm looking at you, Goku. So each specific event causes a character to grow in a certain way as a result of the experiences he or she gains from the said event. What sticks out to me about this is that it's very similar to how people grow and change in real life, like I said before. Each of us has had multiple experiences throughout our lives that influenced our perspectives to one extent or the other. In some cases we've changed drastically, in others perhaps only a little. What's important is that character development in RWBY works the same way. No one is apparently an exception, and I think Jean is a great example of such growth. So like I said, let's start from the beginning. In Volume 1, we had the infamous bully arc in which Jean was frequently picked on by Carden for being weak, as well as generally being a doormat. He later also began blackmailing Jean when he found out that he cheated his way into Beacon, using him as an errand boy to complete his homework and carry out some tasks for him at school, hence why he was a bit of a doormat back then. What served as a tipping point for Jean, however, was when Carden asked him to throw the sap at his teammates as a prank, one that would go too far and endanger his team. Jean decided he'd had none of that, and that's when he faced up to Carden, standing up for himself and his team, and showing the first instance wherein he acted as the leader of his team. And then we move on to Volume 2, where we saw Jean dealing with the fact that the girl he'd been interested in since the very beginning of the show had no intention of reciprocating his feelings whatsoever, even when the guy had the guts to actually come to the doorway and sing with the guitar in such a crazy manner. I actually really like that scene with Jean. Yeah, it's a shame, but Weiss kept rejecting his advances as every possible opportunity. This initially led him to feeling bitter about himself. But when he found out that Neptune had in fact turned down Weiss's invitation, he began to see things from a different perspective. Incidentally, this was the same kind of perspective as Pyrrha, given that his advice to Neptune was very similar to hers, if not almost identical even. I believe this ultimately led Jean to view Pyrrha in a different light and allowed the two of them to grow much closer to each other than ever before. And we see the result of these developments that Jean went through in Volume 3. In it, he demonstrated that he understood who truly was important to him out of everyone that Jean had ever known in his life. Even his family had taken him for a lost cause, and that says something. But Pyrrha was the only person to truly believe in him, who always encouraged him to become stronger and always to keep moving forward. There you go, that's the recurring theme of the series, to keep moving forward. So, in understanding how important Pyrrha was to him, he wanted to repay her for being there for him by being there for her as well. It was pretty obvious from the start that Pyrrha was going through something very heavy, and Jean just couldn't stand by and let it happen. So now in Volume 4, we see Jean going through further growth and having to face the fact that the one person who truly stuck with him was gone for good. With no one there to support him the way Pyrrha's done until now, Jean finds himself in a situation where he has to move forward on his own. Jean's training to Pyrrha's recording represents, at least to me, Jean's determination to face the fact that he doesn't have her anymore. but that in some way he still has to continue moving on. So as we can see, although Jean has had numerous occasions where he's seen character resolution, it can still be said that Jean is going through further growth. This is an important aspect in RWBY's narrative because each volume isn't a complete story in and of itself. In the words of the writers themselves, what takes a typical series one season to accomplish, it takes RWBY several volumes. Volumes 1 through 3 were even described as the prologue, which goes to show just how long RWBY can be. I expect that it's going to go at least up to 10 volumes, if not even 15. So with RWBY being a character-driven show, character growth should also be seen as something taking place over the course of multiple volumes rather than a single volume. A character resolution taking place in one volume does not mean that a character's development is complete. Jean's character resolutions in volume 1 and 2 were simply small increments into his overall growth. We can expect more and more of such increments to take place throughout the course of this series, which will eventually build up Jean into the character he's meant to be. Of course, Jean isn't the only character to have experienced such development. Other good examples I would say include Weiss and Blake, although I won't be covering them in this video simply because if I do, the video will go on for several hours, so I will save that for another time. However, I do want to return to the subject of Yang. Yang has always been one of my favorite characters and of course best girl, namely due to the fact that I appreciate her character traits a lot. That being said, I would be the first to admit that Yang has had relatively little development compared to other characters in the show. I expect the formula for character growth that was seen with Jean will also apply to Yang, and therefore I don't see a reason to say that her putting on her new arm so soon is a sign of her development being rushed. Her development being rushed implies that a specific plot point is being glossed over for the sake of continuity and in order to move things along as fast as possible, something Adele did address in his video. In this instance, the plot point being rushed is Yang's fear that she's no longer the same person that she used to be, and that there's no way for her to be that person again. This was symbolized in episode 3 with the broken glass scene, where she flared up when the glass broke. In my opinion, this represents Yang being afraid that, like the glass, she was too broken to ever be fixed again, and she was afraid that her new arm wouldn't be the solution. In episode 4, she also makes clear that to her, the loss of her arm was her new normal, suggesting that she was simply trying to accept the fact that she wasn't what she used to be and thus no longer moving forward. This is also consistent with her motivation for becoming a huntress, or lack thereof. Unlike her teammates, Yang did not have the same drive as the others, simply going with the flow and living life without knowing what to expect the next day. It showed that she didn't truly have a will to determine her own path, but simply walked a predetermined path. It was such a path that led to her loss of her arm, and she was about to choose to simply continue walking down that same path. Thanks to her interactions with her father as well as Port and Oobleck, Yang began to see things from a different perspective. She is indeed right in believing that her new arm isn't the solution to her problems. As Tai said later in the episode, the solution can only come from within her when he said that normal is what you make of it. As a result, she began to view normal as what she chooses it to be rather than something that already exists. This is why, to me, it makes sense that Yang would choose to wear her arm now. Such an action doesn't represent the fact that she's over her fears and that she's now ready to move on. To me, it represents the choice she's made to face those fears and not remain the broken glass she thought she was. Much like Jean's developments in volumes 1 and 2 individually, this is Yang's character resolution in this volume. The important plot point regarding Yang fearing that she can't be fixed will continue to be addressed, as this is only the first step in her development. Yang is not yet over her fears. Rather, she's still very much afraid, but rather than going with the flow, she's now choosing to swim in a direction of her choice. So much like how we saw the results of Jean's developments in volumes 1 and 2 later on in volume 3, rather than within volumes 1 and 2, I expect the same will be true for Yang. I think we'll see the results of the development that she's going through right now further on down the line. I also believe that RWBY is going to experience such development, but I expect her growth to take longer than every other character in the show. Throughout the first 3 volumes, RWBY's experienced almost no development compared to other major characters. In Volume 4, however, and much like Jean I would say, she's also having to deal with the loss of a friend, with her nightmares being used as a plot device on top of the potential for another major plot point, which I mentioned in one of my earlier episode review videos. I don't believe that Ruby's lack of development was an oversight on the writer's parts, but rather a deliberate move to postpone her growth until it really counts. Like I said before, volumes 1 through 3 were the prologue to the story. These volumes serve to introduce us to major characters in the story, develop them to some extent so that we may familiarize ourselves with them. Now that the prologue is over, we can expect the most important characters to truly shine. One of them is, of course, Ruby. It would make a lot less sense to me if Ruby's development was handled in the early stages of the story, because I believe that the climax of her development should come at the point where we will be the most interested in her fate, that being, of course, the end of the show. Therefore, I expect her development to take place over a much longer span of time. Same with her teammates as well, because after all, the series is named after the entire team, not just Ruby, although they do share somewhat of the same name. So, with that said, I expect a lot of great things from her and Weiss, Blake, and Yang as well. So there you have it. Hopefully what I said in this video sheds some light on reasons why I like this series so much, not just from an action perspective, but also from a storytelling perspective. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Of course, like I said earlier, do check out Adel's video and check out the rest of his channel too, and subscribe to our channels because we would really appreciate it. And like the video if you did, and hopefully I will see you soon.